Governor, this is the largest bond commission agenda that you've had.
Yes.
Are you concerned with the talks that are going on in Washington that Connecticut's credit rating will remain the same? Is there any thinking, what you're thinking behind such a big agenda?
Well, it is a big bond agenda, but let's concentrate on what it does. For instance, in the transportation arena, it accesses well over $1 billion of federal money and unlocks that money to be spent in our state producing jobs, as well as addressing an infrastructure which is woefully inadequate and in some cases moving towards dangerous. So I think that you have to put everything in perspective. Now, you asked another question. And that is what's going on in Washington. I think it's crazy, the whole situation. At least as of last night, the Speaker couldn't rally his own troops to pass his ideas. Those ideas are dead on arrival at the Senate. We already know that. This is a true dance that's going on down there. They could address this issue simply by raising the debt limit, and I support the President in the posture which he has taken. I would have preferred, quite frankly, that the Republicans had joined the President in seeking the grand scenario, which was a reduction over 10 years of spending in excess, or at approximately I shouldn't say spending, the deficit by $4 trillion over approximately 10 years. It would have required sacrifice, but I believe that under all of the long-term scenarios, the President was representing to the greatest extent the interest of state government in those considerations, so I would have supported that. In the absence of that, I simply think they need to get the job done, and the sooner the better. And then finally, the implication is what does it mean for Connecticut? Well, clearly a default by the federal government is potentially a cataclysmic event played out on the world stage with implications far beyond our own borders. And for that reason, I'm hopeful, and I believe that they'll find a resolution in time to make sure that cataclysmic event does not transpire.
The resolution is probably going to include a ton of spending cuts, which might cause as much or more problems for the state, right?
Correct.
What are you most worried about in that area?
What I'm most worried about initially is the breaking of faith by the national federal government, where it would not honor the commitments that it has previously made to the bond market. That's the cataclysmic event. I fear the interest rate repercussions, both short and long term. I fear the drag down effect on the economy as interest rates for individuals would most likely rise, as well as interest rates for municipal and state governments, and the impact that might have on infrastructure investment. So for all of those reasons, I am fearful of the event that I've described, but hopeful that it will not occur.
But in terms of spending cuts, if there's $1 trillion or $2 trillion in cuts, aren't there going to be a lot of federal programs that are going to be cut? What are you most worried about there?
Again, based on my discussions and participation in briefings from the administration, I believe that the President's initial plan on the $4 trillion side was most consistent with supporting state governments. Not that I would have liked everything, but there is there's another side of this. If we address our long-term deficit, federal deficit problems, I believe we can unlock substantial amounts of capital which are on the sidelines within our country, and I think we would be far more inviting of external investment in our state, in our nation, and hopefully our state would benefit from that. So and then having done that, you hope that is a kickstart to the economy. So the idea that the people in Washington can't agree on getting a package that that would reduce the deficit by $4 trillion, I think, is an unbelievable opportunity missed. Now, most likely scenario is we probably get a one-page bill or a bill that does substantially less than that. I believe that Mr. Reed's proposal, although not as sweeping and not necessarily as supportive of state government, is the most likely alternative to a one-sentence bill. So, listen, that's all speculation, but it's speculation on a subject that represents a cataclysmic challenge to the United States and to the world economy.
Mr. Malloy said that he was less concerned about interest rates because if people are fleeing from federal bonds, they might be more encouraged by state bonds, but he was more worried about the potential of a cut in Medicaid, which could be catastrophic to your budget.
Well, you know, as you know, I oppose block granting Medicaid, as do, I believe, all of the Democratic governors. I oppose it because I believe that's would ultimately lead to large-scale cutbacks and in Medicaid, and specifically would be an excuse for the federal government to disengage itself from the long-term promise of 50% funding. So I'm aware of all of those things. Having said that, you know, we have to do things to control cost on the medical side. I have joined a number of governors and specifically sent a letter saying that I think the first step in looking at that system is to address the issue of dual eligibles and how they're treated. And we believe that would save different treatment, one more friendly to state government, would save about $10 billion a year, and we've made that suggestion.
The contract negotiated by the Medical Centers Faculty Union with the state calls for a retroactive 4% raise that would take effect before the 2-year wage freeze under the concession agreement. Do you think that as other state employees learn about this retroactive raise, it will put in jeopardy this vote on the concession agreement?
As I understand that issue is that particular union did not get a raise when other unions did. And this is, for lack of a better term, a catch-up provision. Sure, you're concerned about it. On the other hand, the other unions, as I understand it, received that equivalent raise previously and have had the benefit of it.
Do you think it's really wise for the new combined Department of Energy and Environmental Protection to close down the former DPUC consumer call-in center, which deals with thousands of consumer complaints about utilities?
I would presume that they will construct a way to handle those complaints. I have to tell you that we've got to find less costly ways to do business in state government. Everyone complains about how much we spend, but every time we make a cut, people complain about the cut. Everyone wants the same level of services. We're in an environment where we have to find different and less expensive ways to handle those issues.
Governor, you were federal answering the phone.
Yeah.
Well, why not just cut it in half rather than eliminating the whole thing?
I think that would be better directed to Mr. Esty and his staff.
Governor, is there any concrete change that has occurred in your administration's planning as a result of what's going on with the federal debt crisis, or is it just sort of you're on alert? And I'm thinking of things like, you know, you have DSS undertaking a major, computer enhancement that right now there's some federal matching funds for. But are there any assumptions that you've already changed going forward, saying that at a minimum this stuff is going to be gone?
I don't quite get the last part of your question.
In other words, no matter what the resolution is, complete crisis, that there's a default and there's a larger crisis, or any of the solutions on the table that you've indicated you've already analyzed, under those solutions, is there stuff that you've had to change already, looking at planning on things you want your administration to do in the next year or so?
Well, I can't answer that in specifics because there are, quite frankly, so many different options out there. Suffice it to say that we're aware of the discussions. We think some of the discussions have been better led than others, and that some of the plans are more favorable to state governments than others. Again, I'll remind you, I specifically oppose and hope that we don't go to a block grant Medicaid program, because I think what that sets off is a 50-state race to the bottom, where those that want to maintain current levels of service will be at a disadvantage to those states that don't want to maintain current levels of service. And I support the current levels of service. I'm particularly cognizant of that discussion. I don't think that block granting is anything that the President is currently contemplating agreeing to. I don't believe Senator Reid's, although I'm not specifically, you might have to check it yourself. I don't believe that would include block granting, and right now that would be one of my larger fears.
Governor, today you chose to respond to what has sort of become a ritual of Republicans on the bond commission saying they can't vote for this, they can't vote for that because of this economy, and so forth. But today you responded. Why did you choose to respond on this occasion?
I think on a couple of fronts. Number one, I want people to understand that we're not spending more than our plan, and some folks have tried to indicate that we are. That's simply not the case. I think some of the comments, although not necessarily intended to, might lead people to believe that there's no difference between a capital dollar and an operating dollar, and my administration understands quite clearly that there is. I've stated previously I would not, nor do I intend to bond operating expenses, as was done by my predecessor administration. And then finally, we're not facing an Armageddon in Connecticut. And as I think I appropriately pointed out, even with the $700 million in cuts, of which there is much complaining, it is less than what the Republican budget proposed and voted upon by Republicans would have done.
What's your reaction to this lawsuit that was filed by this assistant prosecutor in Manchester, saying that the whole way that the state's gone about the agreement with CBAC is not legal?
You know, I don't necessarily read that to be as applying to us as it is an inter-union disagreement, and I think that question would be better addressed to the unions.
But what about? Can I just ask a follow-up?
You raised your voice.
Sorry.
Scared?
What about the implication made in the complaint, though, that you went to go talk to the prosecutors before they voted that day in Cromwell? I mean, did you try to influence them in any way to vote in favor of this first agreement?
No. And I think it was taped, so you could go look at the tape. I think they were taping their own meeting. Specifically, I was attending another meeting in that building, not knowing that the prosecutors were having a meeting. Apparently, I was asked by whoever was running, and I don't know who was running the prosecutors' meeting, if I would stop in and say hello to the prosecutors. Being fellow state employees, I accepted the invitation to say hello, which is not to say that I wouldn't have said hello to any room full of 200 people. It is in my nature to say hello to rooms full of 200 people, and I'll accept those invitations in the future.
Governor, you've been on your job tour now for a few weeks. Have you begun to formulate some policy ideas to present during a special session later this summer?
We are. We're hearing some interesting things. We're hearing some bad news. We're hearing some good news. We're certainly going to spend the coming weeks to prepare an agenda for the legislature before we call them back into session. Catherine Smith is working on that diligently. I think it's been a great great meetings. I've learned a lot. I think we've collectively learned a lot. Sure, I think that we are growing our focus on the things that we clearly are currently competitive in, precision manufacturing being one of those. And every time I have visited a precision manufacturer in the state of Connecticut, I come to understand what our advantages are. We need to go after precision manufacturing. We need to support it. So clearly we're looking at that. On the insurance side, talking to insurance executives, as I did last week, we are absolutely benchmarking our rules, our regulations, and our offerings to make sure that we stop losing insurance jobs to other states. Now, in the financial services, there are approximately 134,000 people employed, overwhelming or disproportionately on the insurance side. Insurance has shrunk in this state. I've said I want insurance to be a growth industry. We are getting certainly ideas. We are certainly going to work on the captive insurance issue, and the commissioner, both commissioners are working. Insurance commissioner and Catherine Smith are working on that issue. You know, it's a jobs tour in progress, however, and suffices to say that we will have a series of recommendations before we call people back into session. We will also be reaching out in the coming weeks to members of the state legislature and Senate, both Republicans and Democrats, to make sure that we're having the opportunity to hear their ideas before we prepare a specific legislative agenda.
Governor, the bonding commissioner, you just approved another 25 new rail cars, but even those new rail cars will fail if the overhead electric wires sag in 100-degree weather. Congressman Himes and Congresswoman DeLauro have asked the MTA to try to get together with the local police and other emergency services to try to make sure what happened last Friday doesn't ever happen again. Have you still not had any direct contact with MTA about that?
Actually, I think Commissioner Redeker has had direct contact, and you probably should direct it to him.
Governor, are you waiting to lay off, I believe it's 3 people in your office until after the unions vote? Or do you plan to proceed with the layoffs in your office? You've often said that you're moving ahead as if these things are going to happen.
We don't have the same notice requirements to politically appointed jobs that apply to jobs that are covered by labor contracts. Suffices to say that if in fact these agreements are not approved, then we will make the layoffs in our office immediately effective.
But has anybody received a notice?
No.
Economic development, do you expect to have identified and as announced all 5 of the first ones before that special session?
Yes. Yes.
Are you then going to ask for an additional second first 5?
I have never hidden, in fact, I've advertised that I hope that the first 5 becomes the first 10, 15, 20, 30. It certainly has gotten the attention of companies throughout the region and has gotten coverage on a national basis. So I think it's a good program, and it's entirely possible that we would talk about enlarging or extending that program.
Governor, going back to the layoffs, there are some agencies and departments that are concerned that if the ratification vote isn't finalized until August 18th, they may still have to be making some cuts, some program changes before that period of time. In approaching the layoffs, have you been trying to delay a large portion of them until after the vote occurs, just to give agencies a little bit of breathing space?
No, that would not be a correct surmise. What we did is we proceeded with the layoffs as rapidly as we could, understanding that it's a very complicated system where we need to calculate, and this is really where it gets very difficult, is calculating bumping rights. And so any slowness, and I don't think it's been a particularly slow process, but any slowness was to make sure that I's were dotted and T's were crossed, and that the notice requirements for employees would be in a position to be honored by September 1st. So that's what's driven us, and we've never done anything but hide that. And specifically with respect to our adjustments, going back to the legislative session, the short session, we said that we were looking at an effective date of September 1st because we knew it would take us time to make those changes.
The idea that the voting would be concluded by August 18th and the most layoffs are the following week was just a coincidence.
Can I just point something out to you? That when I announced those layoffs, I had no idea that there would be a revote. So I understand that people like to speculate, but with all due respect, I just ask you to look at the calendar and backtrack and understand that what we were doing was presenting a scenario under which the state's budget would come into balance as a result of cuts, and those cuts are being made. I've not failed to advertise my desire not to go down that road, nor have I hidden the fact that we will go down that road if that's the road we have to go down. I'm just trying to point out to you that when that mechanism was set in motion, we had no idea what would be coming from labor.
You had no idea?
There wasn't any anticipation.
Well, yeah, there was either there would be an agreement or there would not be an agreement. So I had two options. Follow up?
Nah.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Great to be with you. You got to get that cold taken care of. Or is that an allergy?